Hi, my friends. Sometimes you buy tarot decks because you see the images and you're head over heels in love with them. Sometimes you buy them because you're afraid that you're going to miss out on getting it because it's a limited release. Sometimes you buy them and you think you're going to love them and you don't. And then sometimes you buy a deck completely and totally out of curiosity. And that's what I've got here for you today. So I've got the Moonchild Tarot, which I honestly was not intending to buy, but I kept seeing pictures of it and thinking, could I work with that deck? So I'd long been aware of the Starchild Tarot, which never really interested me. I think I felt like it was a deck geared really to women, and I thought that's fine, and that's what that's for. And certainly, I think the complete and total absence of men in it made me feel that way. Now, I don't care about that. Like, that's fine. It just wasn't for me. You know what I mean? There's a lot of decks out there that I think are really beautiful that just are absent that, and I am completely and totally supportive of them. I don't have them in my collection. Like Kelly Fitzgerald of The Truth and Story, you know, I do like balance in all things. So balance in diversity and gender representation, in weights and heights and sexualities and all of that. This deck, from what I could see, had some more diversity to it. It had some men in it. Not a whole lot, but some. And also just really, really sexy packaging, which I have to admit is something that will draw me into a deck sometimes just as much as the cards, you know. I think when I think back on when I started being a Mac user, you know, 10 or 15 years ago, it had a lot to do with like the look, the style, the way they were really thoughtful about their packaging. And that's always been a thing for me. It's like there's a nice, exciting moment of like unwrapping something that's really well packaged. So this sort of fit a lot of that. So there's some diversity in it, and it has really cool packaging. And I honestly was just sort of like, I kind of want to see it in person. Sometimes you just don't know until you see it in person. So I ordered it, and I told a friend of mine, and she said, you know, if someone had made a bet with me about whether or not you would have gotten this deck, I would have bet $100 that you wouldn't. And I honestly was not anticipating on it. I had seen a few walkthroughs of it, and I thought, I like this more than the Starchild. I do not like collage decks, but good on everyone loving it. Like, yay for another good deck. And then I would see it in pictures and readings, and I was sort of like, I wonder how I would work with that, you know? I wonder what it would feel like. I wonder how I would feel if I had it in my hands. So I, as I do, impulsively said, what the hell, let's take a look. And I do that with indie decks, you know, probably more often than I should. But I also feel like, well, you know, if at the end of the day I want to sell or trade it, I can. And who knows, you know, maybe having this thing in my collection will get me access to something I really want one day. So I got it earlier, and I spent a fair amount of time playing with it. And my actual consensus is that I really kind of like it. I do. It's not me in any way. Although I will say I am a fan of Art Deco. I do like Art Deco. So that kind of got me in the cool backs. I sort of really like. So what I thought I would do rather than a walkthrough or like a formal review is just talk about what I like about it, what I don't like about it. And then just give you my overall verdict. So I've kind of divided the deck into 3 piles. And so the largest pile here, the middle pile, we're not really going to look at. These are the cards I have sort of neutral reactions to. And in a weird way, like, I feel that's good, right? Like, I want a fairly neutral reaction to a deck. And then I have a little pile here of cards I just really dislike. and I'll talk about why. And then I have the stack of cards I really like. Now, on top of that, I just want to talk quickly about the cardstock. People have done that. It's really nice cardstock. I will say, you know, it's the kind of cardstock that scratches. And I've really not had it very long, and I don't know if you can see it very well, but there's, yeah, I think you can. There's actually a scratch on the devil already. So that's the thing that happens. You know, I don't really care much about that. Because it's I always say tarot's a practical art form, right? It's meant to be used, and so I don't expect my decks to look pristine. In fact, I don't like them to. I like them to have some wear and tear. But just, you know, just a caveat is that, you know, this kind of cardstock does scratch, and because of the richness of the colors, you're more likely to see that. I mean, that's a trade-off, right? When you don't have a super heavy laminate. All right, so I'm going to put these aside. So this is the second printing, or I think it's the second printing. I don't know how this worked, but essentially in the box came the old guidebook, which is now here. Which was missing, I think, a couple pages. So it came the same way it did in the first printing, and then they just added the new guidebook. I don't know if this is like a new print of it and they just waited until they had the new guidebooks, but so it comes with the old guidebook because it's already in the box packaged. You get the new guidebook, so that's the old one, but everything else is really the same. So let's look at the cards I like a lot, and we'll start with the positive. And actually, when I get to the things I don't quite like, you're going to see that it's not so much there's really nothing stylistically about this deck that I dislike. There just are a few cards that I find they just ring a chord with me in where the collage doesn't work quite as well as they do in other cards, and I'll show you why, and I'll talk about why. But I do really like, and another thing I'll say too is that when I looked at the deck in order, I kind of regretted buying it. I didn't really like it when I looked at it in order. Having shuffled it and done really a handful of readings, like I really spent some time looking at the deck, you know, playing with it, doing some readings, exploring some spreads. When it's laid out in a spread, 90% of the time, maybe 95% of the time, I really love it. And when there's sort of a high proportion of the cards in this pile, I don't. But by and large, and that's the case for any deck, right? I was prepared to go into this deck being harder on it because it's a lot of things that I'm not usually a fan of. Collage, Rider-Waite-Smith. Not that I'm not a fan of Rider-Waite-Smith, again, it's just not my jam for the most part right now. But I do read with it. All right, so here are the cards I really like. This is the Eight of Cups, and I just love the beauty of it. I think it's really gorgeous. Let us turn our phone off. So here's the Eight of Cups. Really like that. I, by and large, really like the core cards in this deck, particularly the Kings and the Queens, and this kind of cameo of the Kings and Queens, and the Knights and Pages are really nice for the most part too, but I particularly like the ones that I didn't put all of them in here, but I put a lot of them in here. I find this Hangman really nice. I have a more old-fashioned view of the Hanged Man than a lot of folks do. I really do look at it as consequences, but I think you can read it in the more traditional Rider-Waite-Smith and the old-fashioned sort of way here. You know, you can do, and I just happen to love the kind of autumnal quality of it. So I have two. There's two stuck together here. I mean, not stuck. They don't really stick, but I picked up two. Here's the Knight of Swords, which I like quite a bit. I love the Eclipse. These are not in order. This is the King of Swords. So again, if you look at the Kings and Queens, they all pretty much have this kind of cameo bust look. And I like it a lot. And they're really diverse. I mean, they're all really diverse in the sense of like skin tone. They're all good looking. You know, this is not a deck where you're going to see a lot of people of different sizes and whatnot, and everyone's pretty good looking, but you know, that's fine. I really like this Emperor. The Aces, by and large, I really like, and I find this Ace of Pentacles really nice. The Hierophant I find really interesting, and I love the color. I love the sort of cosmos within. I think that's cool. Three of Swords I actually really like for a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. I think, this has a lot of room. It has a lot of what I call elasticity. So you can read it the way you would read the Waite-Smith deck, but you can also read it however you want to. Like this Ace of Wands a lot. Seven of Cups I like a lot because it's very pippish. Would have loved more pips. The minors in general, as has been pointed out, the images in the 1 through 10 of each are pretty much all women. I don't think there's any men in there. And overall, I actually would prefer the images without people in them, to be honest. I would have loved a pip version of this deck quite a bit, honestly. This great King of Cups. I think if it had been, I probably would, this would skyrocket to one of my favorites. Beautiful Queen of Pentacles. I like this Justice card a lot, although I can see it easily being mistaken for the Moon. The Two of Swords I think is really cool. This has a very deco feel, which I like. I really love this Empress card. The Queen of Swords I like a lot. Very sort of Joan of Arc quality to it. The King of Pentacles. So you can see the courts, very specifics, particularly the King and Queens. The knights in the pages are a little bit more traditional, but I like this. But again, they're all really attractive men and women. Love this Tower card. That's a beauty. Tower cards are frequently one of my favorite. Then interesting. Ace of Swords I really liked. I like this Magician a lot. I mean, he falls into the canon of hot magicians. The Darkness of Light, the Robin Wood, sort of in the hierarchy of magicians that I would make out with. These are the top three. Really like this Ten of Wands really a lot. The Fool I really like a lot. Although I do tend to read the Fool as much as I will read it as freedom and going on a journey and sort of innocence in search of experience, I also do read it as fool, as something dumb. The Hermit I think is really nice. Not a perfect Hermit for my taste, but I really like it. And the High Priestess I went back and forth on, but I think I tend to dismiss the High Priestess. The High Priestess is a card that for years and years I had a hard time interpreting until I realized that that's the point. The High Priestess withholds. And I don't find this card particularly withholding. There's really a beauty and a welcoming quality to this, which, again, it's fine. So those are the cards I really like. And there's more that I like than that I don't, and certainly, by and large, I felt, there was many in the deck itself that I could have included in the like pile. I just really went for the ones that I like a lot, and there are a lot that I like a lot, which is nice. So the ones that I don't like quite as much, actually, for me, are where the collage doesn't work quite as well. There's an otherworldliness about the human figures in the rest of the deck. These cards, they're very clearly pictures of people, of living real people. And that I don't like as much. It feels jarring in the context of the deck. How many of them did I... There's not a lot, but there's enough that I thought about it. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4... 5, 6, 7. So 7, out of all, 78 is not much, but they are, I really just dislike them. And when they come up in spreads, I feel a little sort of put off for a moment. I should also say that there are 3 extra cards that are in the bottom of the box. I did not include them. I rarely include extra cards. But you can do as you will with that, obviously. So here's the Page of Wands. Not a fan of just how clearly it is collaged. Same thing with the Four of Pentacles. It's so much a picture that I'm sort of who's this person? There's something about photography decks that I've often stayed away from because it lacks a personal distance in a way. I don't know how to describe that, but photography is so real and so present. that it's hard for me as a reader sometimes to not get lost in that part of it. So these cards that I've shared that in my pile that I don't like, they're more photography to me. That's the Seven of Swords than they are collage. And I guess I would say, to be a little flip, the rest of the deck looks like a tarot deck. These look a little bit more like an oracle deck or an ad in a New Age magazine. And so I just find them. This one I actually really like. I went back and forth on. Again, I don't know if you can see. If I had to choose, like, I'm glad I actually put this in here, because now that I'm looking at it again, I really do like this card. But like, if you can look really closely, there's things this is really hard to do. There's things she's done to manipulate the image, where like the clothes in particular are collaged. This isn't quite as extensively collaged, and so this feels more like an ad than this, which feels like the collage in the deck. Like, for me, it's like having gone with the collage, I want to go full bore with it, and these cards feel less like that to me. This one too. And again, I get in trouble sometimes by saying what I really think. I got in trouble by, I guess not in trouble, but I upset folks by saying the Ten of Swords in another deck was a dead rat, and I was being flip about it. But it's what it looks like. Sorry. These two cards, like, this again looks like an ad in a New Age magazine, and this looks like the cover of an Enya record. Like, and I'm being flip and being silly, but like, it just does. You know what I mean? To me, that's what that looks like. That's my perception. And tarot's got a lot to do with perception, so that kind of matters. So you can riffle shuffle this deck. It is not easy to do, but it's definitely possible. You are probably more likely to get scratches on the card that way if you do it, but I find particularly with a new deck, it does require 1 or 2 riffles if that's possible. Happily, this was not in order when I started this video, so I don't have to shuffle it as much. But I just kind of want to show you what it looks like out, and why I sort of, when I looked at it in order, I felt like, it's just another deck. But then when I laid it out, I felt like, oh, it's more than that. You know what I mean? Like, it definitely looks nice. So let me just make sure I can fit it all in. So I'll just lay out 9. But the way the backgrounds and the images work, and the way the collage actually works, I find that you can get, I don't respond all that much to color in readings and spreads, but I feel like you can get sort of a coolness or a warmness to the swirling energy of the backgrounds of the cards, which I think is interesting, and definitely provides a little bit of energy into the spread. And looking at it out as a collection of cards, as a spread of cards, I actually find the deck better looking. Like, this is a deck that I don't really do 1-card readings, or even 1 card per position in a spread. I just need more context than that. So I prefer to do, but like this deck particularly seems to enjoy being laid out in large groups, which is interesting for a deck this large. So did you see how the color tone shifted in the first spread of 9? It was very pastel, very cool. This is much darker, you know what I mean? And there's something interesting to me about the way the color tones can sort of evolve across a spread as you're laying out the cards. And now we're getting much cooler, but mid-tone, but then we have the Fool. Like, it just is really interesting to me the way the backgrounds in this deck, to me, I find it particularly successful, which is one reason why I would love a pip version of this, or a deck without, or even something, more like the Pagan Otherworlds, where there's people in the trumps and the courts, but not in the minors. So laid out, I really like it. Tonally, I feel like it has a very feminine color palette. There's nothing like that's neither here nor there. It's a little pinker than I would go. You know, I tend to live in sort of greens and grays, but I feel like there's enough greens and grays in here. And I actually really do like it a lot. There are some, I'm going to be totally honest, like this card here, the Five of Swords, reminds me of someone who I have like a negative reaction to. So that's another thing that I find with like photorealistic decks. The Fountain Tarot is this way for me too, interestingly, even though that's clearly painting. The faces are so realistic that I can occasionally find myself irritated when the photograph reminds me of someone that I don't like. You know, but it's true. So when I see this card, it makes me think of this particular person. It's, as a reader, I have to sort of say, okay, you're reacting to the photograph, and you're projecting this person on, and that's not what the card is. So that's why I actually don't. I would rather, if there's going to be a photo collage deck, I would rather it not have people, or if the deck is photorealistic, I would rather it not have super realistic faces. I prefer more abstracted art, like the Japaridza, for example, because the personal associations, it's easier to keep a distance from. But with those qualifiers in place, I like this deck a lot. And, you know, again, for a deck that was purchased completely out of curiosity, it's a nice surprise. It's better than the opposite, which is like getting it and hating it, which happens sometimes too. I tend not to post those. I really appreciate the font on this deck. The Star Child, this is the Moon Child. I do have a hard time keeping the two straight. The Star Child font is the same font used on the American Horror Story logo. So, like, I can't kind of not see the American Horror Story thing there. And that was just very clearly not a deck that was meant for me, and that's fine. Again, not everything is meant for me. This one made me go, is this one, could this fill a space in my collection? And I think maybe I could see using this with the Darkness of Light for like a light and shadow spread, for example, because the energy feels very similar to me, even though this is collage and those are paintings. I do like it. Will it become a go-to? Will I pull this out and work with it? I don't know. Honestly, I have all of the decks I pulled out for October. I really did not read much at all in October, which compared to last year is very different. Like, I just was not, unless I had a client reading, and I don't even know if I think I had maybe one or two client readings last month. Like, I just was not reading. And when I was working on Lenormand spreads for Camellia Elias's class. And even that, like in the last few weeks of the class, I sort of stepped away from. I tend not to read when my anxiety gets heightened, and I don't know if it's election season or 100 other things going on in the world, at work and in life. I just have not been reading. So honestly, today was the first time in weeks that I sat down and worked with cards in any way, and it was in sort of a superficial way, to be honest, but superficial in the sense of just playing, but sometimes that's really helpful. And another thing, this is totally unrelated, but another thing that sometimes happens is when I go a while without reading, I sometimes worry that I've forgotten how, and that I'm not going to be good anymore. And so, like, that sort of cycle of anxiety will kick in where I haven't read for a while, or I haven't read for a few weeks, and then the thing comes up where I think, oh, maybe I'll do a reading on Instagram, and then I'm like, nah, I get afraid that I've lost the ability. But it's usually not the case. Usually the case is I've just gotten lazy, Sometimes I do. I preach about tenacity and specificity and having a good question and all of the things that I think lead to good readings, but I'm just as guilty as being lazy as many people are when it comes to that stuff. So that's me, and that's my life at the moment. While it's on my mind, The 3 extra cards are Shadow Work, Divine Wisdom, and Moonchild. The one that I could say I could actually imagine using in a Benabel Wen kind of way is to use the Shadow Work card as a significator, to shuffle it into the deck, and then, as Benabel Wen talks about in her deck and book, pulling the cards in front of it. So you could shuffle this in, the Shadow Work card, as a significator, as something to say, like, where's the shadow right now that I need to work on. So I could see doing that. And I like the extra cards, I just don't use extra cards. The guidebook is really nice. This is the corrected version that I haven't, well, I think it's corrected. I didn't look. I imagine after everything they went through, they would have not sent it out if it wasn't working. It's really nice for a book. I mean, it really, I think these little books are really, really effective for a lot of things. I think a lot of decks, by mass-produced publishers, sort of pad the book a little bit. But I think, you know, if you think, for example, about the Shadowscapes Tarot, which also I think would complement this one beautifully. The book in the American version is huge. The Czech version has the same information in it, but it fits in a box about this size. So there you go. Anywho, here's the old book. That's my thoughts and experience with the Moonchild Tarot. I actually really like it. Completely, you know, not expecting anything when it came in the mail. Really got it out of curiosity, but in this case, curiosity did not kill the cat, and I think it'll be sticking around for at least long enough for me to work with it a little bit. But I will say that there's a quality to this deck, and I don't know if it's it sounded like I was winding up, didn't it? And then I wasn't. Sometimes decks really just make you want to work with them. The Corte de Taroki is like that. You know, this is a deck that I always just want to, like, get out of the box and shuffle and lay out. The Megamundin Tattoo Tarot is like that. The Japaridza Tarot is like that. There are a bunch in my collection that make me want to just have them in my hands. And there's a quality to this that does that. The two, you know, the Victorian Romantic and the Victorian Romantic almost more than the Bohemian Gothic, but those two, now I'm gonna just think about them. The Vampire Tarot, Robin Place's Vampire Tarot, the Mermaid Tarot, there are lots. The Wildwood, the Marshmallow, the Millennium Edition Marseille. Those are all decks that I just sort of love to have in my hands, and so this has that quality too. So I can see it getting some use. So that's that. I am actually going to wind down now. I hope that you're well and that this was interesting, and be good.